Years ago, I knew a farmer who said something I've never forgotten. He said, "Earl, the land doesn't care how you feel. You plow in the spring whether you're in the mood or not, because if you wait until you feel like it, you'll have no harvest in the fall." That, my friend, is the whole secret of discipline in a single sentence. It is a debt, and like any debt, it comes due whether you're ready or not. The only question is, do you pay it in advance on your own terms, or do you pay it later with interest in the form of regret? Now let me tell you about a man who understood this better than perhaps anyone in American history, Thomas Edison. Here was a man who failed, by his own count, some 10,000 times before he successfully produced a working light bulb. 10,000 times. Now, most men would have quit after the 10th attempt, convinced that failure was a sign to stop. But Edison saw it differently. When a reporter asked him how it felt to fail 10,000 times, Edison said, and I want you to really hear this, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." You see, my friend, Edison was paying his debt in advance. Every failed experiment, every long night in that laboratory in Menlo Park, every ounce of discipline poured into a problem that showed no signs of solving itself. That was the payment. And the world remembers the light bulb, the phonograph, the motion picture camera. But what the world often forgets is the price that was paid, quietly, patiently, in advance, long before the applause ever came. That is the law at work. Edison didn't wait for inspiration to discipline him. He disciplined himself, and inspiration, in time, was forced to show up. My friend, I want to tell you something that may unsettle you a little, and I say this with respect, because it once unsettled me too. You did not choose whether or not you would face discipline in your life. That decision was made for you the moment you were born into a world governed by natural law. Somewhere out there, right now, a bill is coming due in your life, in your health, in your finances, in your work, in your relationships, and it will be collected. Whether you like it or not, whether you're prepared or not, there is no escaping it, no negotiating with it, no talking your way out of it. It sits there, quietly, patiently, waiting for its moment. And most people go through their entire lives never realizing this bill exists until the day it's presented to them, all at once, with staggering interest attached. Now, hold on just a moment. Before you let that thought settle too heavily on your shoulders, let me show you something remarkable, something that changes everything. This debt, as I call it, is not a punishment. It is not some cruel joke played on humanity. It is simply the price of a worthwhile life, and here is the marvelous part. The price is always the same, but the terms are entirely up to you. You see, every architect who ever designed a great building paid this debt in years of study before a single brick was laid. Every athlete who ever stood on a podium paid it in thousands of hours nobody applauded. In empty gymnasiums, before dawn, when no one was watching and no one cared. They did not wait for the debt to find them. They went looking for it. They sought it out deliberately, in small, manageable installments, a little today, a little tomorrow, and by doing so, they transformed something that could have crushed them into something that quietly built them, brick by brick, into the person they were meant to become. This is the whole secret, my friend. Discipline is not something you avoid. It is something you schedule. It is not a burden dropped on you by chance. It is a debt you take charge of, on your own terms, at a time and pace of your own choosing. And here, at last, is the good news, the news that should put your mind entirely at ease. Once you understand that this debt is coming no matter what, a great weight lifts from your shoulders. You are no longer waiting anxiously for life to demand something of you. You simply decide today to make the first small payment, a single disciplined act, however modest. And in that moment, you take control of something most people spend their entire lives fearing. That, my friend, is where true peace of mind begins. Consider, for a moment, a man standing at the edge of his 60th year, looking back across the decades behind him. He is not haunted by the mistakes he made. Mistakes, after all, can be corrected, learned from, folded into wisdom. No, what troubles him most are the things he never attempted at all. The book he never wrote, the apology he never offered, the habit he always meant to build starting Monday. These are not failures in the ordinary sense. They are unpaid accounts, accumulating silently across an entire lifetime. And now, in his later years, they have all come due together in a single crushing statement. Stay with me here, because this is where most people quietly excuse themselves from the conversation. They say, surely there's still time. Surely I can put this off a little longer without consequence. And so the postponement continues, not through some dramatic decision, but through 1,000 small, unremarkable choices to simply do it tomorrow instead of today. But here is what I want you to genuinely understand. Regret is not a feeling that ambushes a person out of nowhere. It is a bill, long overdue, finally presented for payment, and by the time it arrives, the currency required is no longer effort or inconvenience. It is something far more costly. It is years. It is opportunities that will not present themselves twice. It is relationships that have quietly closed their doors. Compare this to the young craftsman who spends his evenings sharpening his skills while his companions spend theirs in idle amusement. He feels, at the time, as though he is missing something. Yet, 20 years later, it is his companions who feel the true cost, not in money, but in the ache of unrealized potential, in the persistent whisper of what might have been. The very same obligation existed for both men. Only one of them settled it while it was still affordable. Now, here is the turn I want to leave you with, because it changes the entire weight of what we've just discussed. If regret is simply an unpaid balance, then it can never spring upon you unannounced. It only ever visits those who were warned repeatedly and chose to look away, which means the antidote is not some elaborate transformation of character. It is far simpler than that. It is a single decision made today to stop letting the account grow, to make one small deposit toward the life you actually want, rather than allowing another day to pass unaccounted for. This, then, is the quiet comfort behind everything I have said. You are not condemned to a future of reckoning. That future is not yet written. Every ledger can still be balanced, provided you begin now, in whatever small way is available to you. The years you have not yet lived owe you nothing yet, and they never will, so long as you refuse to let another day slip by unpaid. Picture a single drop of water falling onto a stone once a day for years without end. On any given afternoon, if you happen to walk by and watch that one drop fall, you would think nothing of it. It would seem almost foolish to imagine that something so small could ever accomplish anything at all. And yet, return to that same stone many years later, and you will find a channel worn clean through solid rock, carved not by force, not by a single dramatic event, but by faithful repetition, one modest drop at a time. Now, many people, when they first commit themselves to bettering their lives, make a curious mistake. They look for the dramatic gesture. They want the sweeping transformation, the all-night effort, the heroic push that settles everything in one great stroke. And when that single push doesn't rearrange their entire life overnight, they grow discouraged, conclude that the effort isn't working, and quietly abandon it altogether, often just days before they might have seen real progress. Let me offer you the truth of the matter, because it is far simpler and far kinder than most people realize. Nature herself does not deal in sudden leaps. The oak does not arrive full grown. It accumulates ring by ring, season after season, unnoticed for long stretches at a time, until one day you look up and realize it has become something magnificent. This is precisely how genuine capability is built in a human life. Not through one heroic Saturday of extraordinary effort, but through 20 minutes of reading each evening, through one honest conversation instead of an easy silence, through a single rejected excuse repeated daily until it becomes, quite without ceremony, simply who you are. Consider two men setting out to master a new skill. One waits for a long stretch of open time to devote himself entirely to it, certain that a large, uninterrupted effort will produce the greatest results. The other commits to a modest 20 minutes each day, rain or shine, whether he feels inspired or not. Within a single year, it is almost always the second man who has progressed the furthest, not because his method was more clever, but because it was sustainable, and sustained effort, however unremarkable it appears from day to day, is the only force in nature capable of producing lasting mastery. Here, then, is what I want to leave with you today, because it removes an enormous weight from the shoulders of anyone striving to grow. You do not need to summon some extraordinary burst of willpower to change your life. You do not need to reserve every ambition for some distant day when conditions are finally perfect. You need only manage today's small portion, faithfully, quietly, without fanfare, and allow it to repeat. Do that, my friend, and you will discover, in time, that the modest and unremarkable daily payment is the very thing carving the channel through which your entire future will one day flow. Somewhere along a great river, there stands a levee, built years ago, holding back an enormous weight of water that would otherwise flood the fields and towns downstream. For a long while, everything appears calm. The water sits quietly behind its wall, and the people living nearby go about their business, rarely giving the structure a second thought. But rivers do not forget what they are owed. Every season the water rises a little higher, presses a little harder, and the levee, never reinforced, never inspected, never tended to, grows a little weaker beneath the strain. Then one spring, without warning to those who weren't watching closely, the whole structure gives way at once, and years of quiet pressure arrive on the town in a single overwhelming night. This, my friend, is precisely what happens to the man or woman who spends years avoiding what ought to have been addressed gradually. They tell themselves the strain is manageable, that there's no urgency, that the structure will hold just fine without their attention. And for a good while, it seems they are right. Nothing dramatic happens. No alarm sounds, which only convinces them further that caution was unnecessary in the first place. But here is the plain truth of the matter, and I ask you to consider it carefully. Nothing that is postponed simply disappears. It gathers. The employee who never addresses a growing weakness in his craft does not remain merely average. He falls further behind with each passing year until the gap between himself and his more disciplined peers becomes too wide to close in a single season. The individual who neglects his health year after year does not receive a gentle reminder. He receives, all too often, a sudden and severe diagnosis, demanding in a single moment what could have been managed gradually across a decade. In every case, the very same pattern holds. What could have been distributed across many small, tolerable moments instead collects itself into one overwhelming reckoning, arriving precisely when a person is least prepared to meet it. Now here is where I want to lift the weight from your shoulders, because this understanding, once truly grasped, becomes remarkably freeing. The size of the eventual reckoning is not fixed by fate. It is fixed entirely by how long the matter is left unattended. A levee reinforced early requires only modest, ongoing effort. Left alone for years, it requires a complete rebuilding, undertaken in crisis, under far worse conditions than would ever have been necessary otherwise. Which means the choice before you is not whether pressure exists in your life. It always will. The choice is simply whether you attend to it early in small and manageable measures, or whether you allow it to gather in silence until it can no longer be ignored. Tend to your structure now, my friend, while the water is still calm, and you will never have to stand helplessly downstream, watching everything you built swept away in a single thunderous night. Imagine a small splinter, lodged just beneath the skin of a working man's hand. In the first hour, it is nothing at all, a minor irritation, removable in a moment with a steady hand and a bit of patience. He barely feels it. He could attend to it right there, standing at his workbench, and be done with the matter entirely. But he is busy. There is work to finish, and the splinter, after all, is such a small thing. Surely it can wait until evening. And so evening comes, and he is tired, and surely it can wait until morning. Days pass this way, and something curious begins to happen. The skin around that tiny sliver of wood grows red, then tender, then swollen. What began as a matter requiring 30 seconds and a steady pair of fingers now requires a physician, a blade, and considerably more suffering than the original inconvenience would ever have demanded. Now, this is not merely a story about splinters, my friend. It is the exact mechanism by which every postponed obligation in life grows heavier the longer it is left unaddressed. A small disagreement between two friends, left unspoken, does not remain a small disagreement. It festers, gathers resentment, invites misunderstanding, until what could have been resolved over a single honest conversation now requires the mending of an entire relationship. A minor debt, left unpaid, does not remain minor either. It accumulates interest upon interest, compounding month after month until the original sum is dwarfed by what has grown around it. In every instance, the obligation itself may have started small. It is the waiting that transforms it into something formidable. Here, then, is the principle I want you to carry with you, stated as plainly as I know how. Time does not neutralize an unpaid debt. It multiplies it. The longer a matter is left untouched, the more it costs to finally set right, not occasionally, not in special cases, but as a near universal rule of how obligations behave when they are ignored. This is why the student who addresses a weak subject early, while the material is simple, spends far less effort than the one who waits until the material has grown complicated beyond recognition. This is why the small act of courage taken now is always less costly than the greater courage eventually demanded when circumstances have hardened around your hesitation. And here, at last, is the encouragement I want to leave with you. Since every delay makes the eventual cost heavier, the reverse must also be true. Every moment you choose not to delay is a moment where the cost remains at its lowest possible price. You need not summon extraordinary courage to address what troubles you. You only need to address it now. While it is still small, while it is still simple, while the price still belongs to you and not to time. Thrack that splinter out today, my friend, and you will never have to face the physician tomorrow. There is an old image that has stayed with me for many years, that of a man in chains, laboring endlessly to satisfy a master he never chose to serve. He rises when he is told to rise. He works when he is told to work. Every hour of his day belongs, in truth, not to himself, but to the obligation standing over him. And the tragic part is this. Very few men in such a position ever arrived there through a single dramatic event. They arrived there gradually, through years of small surrenders, each one seemingly harmless at the time, until one day they looked up and realized the debts they had ignored were no longer asking politely. They were commanding. Now, consider how many people live this way without ever recognizing their condition for what it is. The man buried in obligations he postponed spends his days serving those obligations rather than his own ambitions. The woman who never tended to her health finds her later years dictated by appointments and limitations rather than by her own choosing. In each case, something remarkable and unfortunate has occurred. The debt, left unattended long enough, has quietly reversed the natural order of things. It is no longer the person who directs the debt. It is the debt that directs the person. But here is what I want you to understand clearly, because it is the very heart of everything we have discussed together. This outcome is never inevitable. It is simply the accumulated result of many small moments where a person could have taken charge and chose, instead, to look away. Which means the opposite is equally true and far more encouraging. The man who rises early to strengthen his mind, the woman who tends faithfully to her craft, though no one applauds her for it, the individual who settles each small account before it, has the chance to grow. These people are not, in any meaningful sense, restricted by their discipline. They are, in fact, the freest people you will ever encounter. Nothing looms over them because nothing has been left to loom. Their time belongs to them entirely because they have already paid what was owed on their own terms at a pace of their own choosing. This, my friend, is the final and most important truth I want to leave with you today. Every single person is either the master of their obligations or eventually becomes their servant, and the deciding factor is never talent, nor luck, nor circumstance. It is simply this: who pays first? Pay early, and you walk through life unburdened, standing upright, answering to no one but your own ambitions. Delay, and you will one day find yourself answering to a master you never intended to create. One built, quietly, from every debt you once thought could wait. Choose, then, today, which kind of life you intend to lead. The instrument is already in your hands. It always has been. All that remains is to begin. There is a peculiar thing about a leaking pipe hidden behind the wall of a house. For a long while, the damage stays right where it began, quiet, contained, invisible to anyone walking through the rooms above. But water, my friend, does not respect boundaries. Left alone long enough, it travels. It finds its way beneath the floorboards, into the foundation, up through the walls of rooms that had nothing at all to do with where the trouble started. And one day, the homeowner is startled to discover that a single ignored leak in the basement has quietly compromised the structure of the entire house. Many people believe their neglected disciplines stay neatly confined to the area in which they were neglected. They tell themselves, yes, I've let my health slide a little, but that has nothing to do with my work. Yes, I've grown careless with my finances, but surely that won't touch my marriage, my confidence, my peace of mind. And for a while, it does appear this way. The trouble seems isolated, manageable, contained behind its own wall. But here is the plain truth I want you to consider closely. No obligation in a human life is ever truly isolated. The man who neglects his health finds his energy diminished at work, his patience shortened at home, his confidence quietly eroded in every room he enters. The woman who avoids a difficult conversation in one relationship often finds herself avoiding difficult conversations everywhere else as well, because the habit of avoidance, once formed, does not stay politely in its designated place. It seeps. It travels along the hidden channels of a person's character until it has touched nearly everything they do. This is precisely why the individual who begins paying a single debt in advance, who commits, say, to rising early or to speaking honestly, or to finishing what they start, often notices something remarkable happening in areas of life that seemingly had nothing to do with the original commitment. Their work improves. Their relationships steady. Their confidence, quite unexpectedly, grows firmer. This is not coincidence, my friend. It is simply the same principle working in reverse. Discipline, like neglect, does not stay confined to a single room either. It too travels through the entire house. And here, at last, is what I want you to carry forward. You need not repair every room of your life at once, believing the task too large to undertake. Attend faithfully to a single account, one discipline, paid consistently, in one corner of your life, and you will find, in time, that its influence quietly reaches rooms you never directly touched at all. The structure strengthens as a whole, simply because one true repair was finally made. Mend the leak where you find it, my friend, and let the strength travel where it will. There is a violinist I once read about who, in her earliest years of practice, dreaded the sound of her own instrument in the empty hours of the afternoon. Every session felt like an obligation, a debt owed to some distant, imagined performance she could barely picture. She counted the minutes. She watched the clock. The ball felt heavy in her hand, and the notes came only through great and deliberate effort. Now, most people, standing at this stage of any worthwhile pursuit, conclude that this heaviness is simply the permanent cost of discipline, that it will always feel this effortful, this obligatory, for as long as the practice continues. And believing this, a great many of them quietly set the instrument down, convinced the burden will never lighten, and that there is little use continuing to pay a debt that never seems to shrink. But here is what actually occurs, my friend, if the payments continue faithfully long enough. Something begins to shift, so gradually that it can hardly be detected in any single week. The violinist no longer reaches for the instrument out of obligation. She reaches for it because a day without it now feels somehow incomplete. The notes, once labored over, now arrive with a familiarity that requires no deliberate summoning at all. What began as a debt, paid reluctantly in advance, has quietly transformed into something else entirely. It is no longer a payment. It has become simply who she is. This, my friend, is the final and most remarkable secret hidden within everything we have discussed. Discipline, faithfully practiced over enough time, does not remain discipline forever. It graduates. It becomes character. The early riser no longer battles his alarm clock because early rising has become, quite simply, his nature. The honest man no longer weighs the temptation to deceive because honesty is no longer a choice he renews each morning. It has become the very shape of his character. The debt has not vanished because it went unpaid. It has vanished because it has been paid so consistently for so long that it no longer requires conscious payment at all. And here is the encouragement I most want to leave with you at the close of everything we have explored together. You need not resign yourself to a lifetime of effortful payments, gritting your teeth indefinitely against some obligation that never eases. Every debt, paid faithfully and repeatedly in advance, eventually stops feeling like a debt at all. It becomes woven into the fabric of who you are. No longer a bill you dread, but simply a reflection of your own nature, requiring no more conscious effort than breathing. This, then, is where discipline finally leads, my friend, if you remain faithful to it long enough, not to a lifetime of obligation, but to freedom, the freedom of a character so well built that the debt, at last, has quietly paid itself into permanence. And so, my friend, we come to the end of our time together, though I suspect, if I've done my part well, this is really only the beginning for you. We began with a simple, sobering truth. Discipline is not something you get to choose or refuse. It is a debt, already written into the ledger of your life the moment you were born into a world governed by natural law. You did not select whether you would pay it. You only get to choose when. Pay it early, in small and unremarkable installments, a little today, a little tomorrow, and it wears a gentle name, discipline. Delay it and let it gather in silence, and it returns to you wearing a much harsher name, regret. The debt itself never changes. Only the manner of its collection does. We spoke of the drop of water carving its channel through solid stone, not through force, but through faithful repetition. We spoke of the levee holding quietly against a rising river, and what becomes of those who never reinforce it. We spoke of the splinter, harmless in its first hour, and monstrous in its fifth day of neglect. And we spoke, too, of the debt's peculiar habit of spreading, seeping silently from one room of a person's life into every other room, until nothing remains untouched by what was once ignored. But above all, my friend, we arrived at the most encouraging truth of them all. Paid faithfully and long enough, this debt does not remain a debt at all. It graduates. It becomes character. It becomes, quite simply, who you are, no longer something you must remember to do, but something you have become incapable of not doing. So, let me leave you with this. Somewhere, Right now, there is a small payment waiting for you. Modest, unremarkable, easily postponed. Perhaps it is an early morning you've been avoiding. Perhaps it is a conversation, a habit, a page left unwritten, a health left untended. Whatever it is, I ask you only this. Do not wait for life to present the bill on its own terms. Step forward and pay it yourself today, while it is still small, while it is still yours to control. For in the end, my friend, there are only two kinds of people in this world. Those who pay their discipline in advance and walk through life unburdened, and those who delay and spend their years quietly serving a debt they once had every opportunity to settle on their own terms. The choice, as it always has been, is entirely yours. And the moment to begin is now.